Mr. Chair, the EPA is trying to force our Skowhegan mill to spend millions of additional dollars on special smokestack equipment because wet biomass burns darker. Our businesses need that energy to keep our manufacturing jobs right here in America and not send them to China. This is a national security issue as well as a jobs issue, Mr. Chairman.
Set the R factor at 1. You EPA folks know what I mean. What that does is it effectively acknowledges the improved life cycle carbon footprint of renewables over petroleum-based fuels.
Do trees sequester carbon from the environment, and how is that done? If you think about it, you start out, a tree starts out as a little seed, weighs less than an ounce, say, and then as it grows, it becomes this massive tree that may weigh tons. All right, where did the weight of that, where did the mass of that tree come from? About 5% of it comes from mineral elements in the soil, but the rest of it is carbon from carbon dioxide. It's all that weight of that tree is basically solidified carbon dioxide that was absorbed from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Woody biomass is a sustainable form of energy because it's a renewable product. We can theoretically we can keep growing it sustainably, and it's really a form of solar energy. The energy that we're releasing from woody biomass to create electricity or to space heat our homes. This is all energy that was converted from sunlight into chemical bonds in the wood.
For years, the biomass industry would say they are carbon neutral, as in all of the emissions that they put out are reabsorbed by forests. So even though if there's different forests that they have nothing to do with, they're claiming that that's a way to neutralize the carbon impacts, as in there's no impacts. That's been debunked many times by many studies, and really just by 8th grade science or common sense. The idea that when you cut down trees that are currently storing and sequestering carbon, and then you burn them, and then that pulses into the atmosphere instantly, that's clearly a climate impact. A lot of folks think the biggest problem is the fact that it's a combustion technology. When you think of a solar panel or a wind turbine, there's obviously impacts involved with building these facilities, no question about that. But once they're built, they're not emitting really anything. A bioenergy facility, aside from all of the construction that has to go on to make the facility, and then even the transportation of the material, if we're talking about forest biomass from the forest, all of the fossil fuels that go into logging and then transporting that material. That aside, a biomass facility emits copious amounts of toxic air pollutants.
We also have this issue of the carbon debt, where when we replace fossil fuels with wood, the wood is not as concentrated a source of energy, and we actually put out more CO2 per BTU or per kilowatt hour than we would using fossil fuels. So initially, in the conversion from fossil fuels to wood, there is a kind of a carbon debt, and then at some point we meet that carbon debt, and we're actually using woody biomass. We're actually absorbing as much carbon dioxide as we are releasing when that carbon debt is paid.
A lot of the industry is now just saying the word low carbon because they've been called out on the carbon neutral argument. But some of them, when you press them, will say, you know what? This carbon doesn't even count. This is tree carbon. It's not fossil fuel carbon. So we can emit as much of that as we want to in the atmosphere.
We know that the government's own research has shown that burning trees can actually be worse for the climate than fossil fuels.
So realistically, we're down to two sources. We're either fuel oil or we're biomass. We've chosen biomass.
Biomass, in this case sawdust from local sawmills, is a renewable resource and an alternative to fossil fuels.
The low-hanging fruit is bioenergy. So they need to do something to make it look like they're doing something. So let's just cut down some forests, prop up the dying timber industry a bit more, send it to some facilities, in some cases converting coal plants to partially burn biomass, which makes it so these coal plants stay open and continue to burn more coal as well. And then we can make it seem like we are doing something for the climate.